Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be taking a look at the past 8 years of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi taking office. We're going to be looking at some of the major, mega national projects that have been taking place in the country, be it infrastructure, be it agriculture, energy, all sorts of national mega projects that have been taking place over the past 8 years. Also the initiatives, and we're going to be looking at how much has been achieved so far and what still needs and is hoping the Egyptian society is hoping to be achieved in the near future. But before we start doing that, let's check out some of the stories making the news today. And we'll start off with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who met today with General Amir Said Ahmed, the presidential advisor for urban planning, and Major General Ihab al-Far, head of the Engineering Authority of the Armed Forces. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassam Radi said President el-Sisi was briefed on the developments of the giant national project for agricultural production, the New Delta. The project aims at increasing the agricultural area in Egypt along the Daba axis, as it includes within its scope several pivotal projects for agricultural developments, including Egypt's Future Project. The President directed to continue strengthening the agricultural reclamation efforts in the New Delta project and the subsequent establishment of extended urban communities, which would achieve the state's goals in its seeking to establish new comprehensive development center by achieving horizontal expansion away from overcrowded areas. Also today, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and the Presidential Aide for Strategic and National Projects, Engineer Sharif Ismail, Minister of Planning and Economic Development, Hala Said, Minister of Finance, Mohammed Maid, Minister of Youth and Sports, Ashraf Subhi, Presidential Advisor for Urban Planning, General Amir Said Ahmed, Presidential Advisor for Financial Affairs, General Mohammed Amin, and Head of the Armed Forces Engineering Authority, General Ihab al-Far. Presidential spokesperson said the meeting tackled the construction situation of Egypt's international city for Olympic Games in the new administrative capital. The President was briefed on the work stages of the Olympic city, which includes different sports facilities built in accordance with the highest international standards. The head of state directed to finish the construction works in the city according to schedule. Also today, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met with Mr. Simba Rashi Moben Gigwi, the special envoy for Zimbabwe's president. The meeting was attended by CEO of the African Institution of Knowledge, Kwame Mozawazi, and Zimbabwe's ambassador to Cairo, Sheba Shobiawanda. Presidential spokesperson said that President el-Sisi conveyed his greetings to his counterpart, Emerson Mnangagwa, stressing Egypt's keenness on boosting its relations with Zimbabwe, especially in the fields of commerce and investments. The head of state also pointed to Egypt's keenness on enhancing coordination and consultation with Zimbabwe in issues related to boosting mechanisms, African joint cooperation in a way that contributes in achieving stability and development in the continent. For his part, the Zimbabwean high-level official submitted a letter from President Mnangagwa to President el-Sisi in which he stressed his country's keenness on boosting bilateral relations on various levels. These were some of the stories making the news today, and now let's also check out this report regarding the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sameh Shukri, in the German city of Bonn. to attend the signing of the agreement for Egypt to host the 27th UN session of the Conference of Parties, COP27, which is set to be held in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh next November this year. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry is visiting the German city of Bonn to sign the agreement for Egypt to host the 27th UN session of the Conference of the Parties, COP27, which will be held in the Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh in November this year. The agreement is scheduled to be signed on the sidelines of the 56th session of the subsidiary bodies in which COP27's President-designate Shoukry is participating. The 56th session of subsidiary bodies aims to lay the groundwork for success at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, as governments in Bonn will focus on work in the key areas of mitigation, adaptation, and supporting developing countries, particularly financially. Shoukry meets a number of high-ranking international officials concerned with climate change, in addition to representatives of non-governmental organizations that are certified in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. Speaking to delegates at the opening of the Bonn sessions, UN Climate Change Executive Secretary Patricia Spinoza said the world is going to have one question in Sharm el-Sheikh, which is what progress have you made since Glasgow last year? COP27 in Egypt will primarily focus on implementation, and nations are expected to show how they will, through legislation, policies and programs, and throughout all jurisdictions and sectors, begin putting the Paris Agreement into practice in their home countries, according to the United Nations.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined now over the phone to shed more light on the visit of the Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry to the German city of Bonn. We're joined by Dr. Sharif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs at the University of Paris. Dr. Amir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Dr. Amir, now, today we are witnessing also the visit by Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry to Bonn to witness the signing of Egypt hosting the next UN Climate Change Summit, the COP27 in November in Sharm el-Sheikh this year. Now, with such a visit and also preceding visits by Foreign Minister Shoukry, who is the President-designate of the COP27 summit, how would you rate the preparations taking place ahead of the COP27 summit?
Well, it's very significant because we all know the international context that we're living now, the circumstances. So it happened that we have to work with all our partners to ensure that this summit will be a success, that it will bring the voice of the developed world to the international community, because it's held not in Paris or not in London as it was before. It's the first time in an African nation, so it's in Sharm el-Sheikh. So I think that we are doing a great job, a tremendous job. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry is now ensuring that everyone will be prepared for this summit, that Egypt is showing also that it's ready. We have to give all the assurances to our partners that we are ready for this summit. It's very difficult, I repeat, because we know what's going on the international arena now, and I think that diplomacy is the Egyptian diplomacy, is playing a huge role now to mend all the fences, because we have to ensure the success of such a summit in Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Amir, what would be considered a success for the COP27 summit? I mean, holding it in itself is a success story for Egypt, but as you've mentioned, there are a lot of different turbulences and crises taking place around the world concerning energy specifically as well, which is related to climate change. Now, what would be a success, or what would be considered success for the COP27 being hosted by Egypt, the first time in an African country, also during such a critical time for the international developments?
Well, as you said, the card of energy. And I want to say that why this COP27 would be significant and also not easy. Because, you see, now we are witnessing the superpowers around the world are using the cards of oil, gas, and all the natural resources that we all know. Everyone has put aside suddenly the green energy, which is COP27 should endorse. So that's why I'm saying it's difficult, because how we will focus on this energy, this will take a huge effort from not only Egypt, but from the UN also, to tell the developed nations, the superpowers, that we have to find another means of energy. And let's be frank, I don't think that countries like the United States, like Russia, and many European countries are ready now to tackle this issue, because we are witnessing a pseudo, it's not real, but a pseudo world war about the energy now. So I think that we will have to ensure that the voice of Africa, the voice of the developed states should be heard, and we should tell everyone that we cannot be the victim of what's going to happen in the coming few months in this international struggle. We have to be protected. So there'll have to be other resources of energy, and in a peaceful way. But I repeat again, it depends on how these administrations in all the superpower capitals will react. Are they ready to work relentlessly to fight the climate change, or they will be, as we are seeing now, struggling for the gas, for the oil, even the grains now, the wheat, everything is putting on a stake. So we are living on a very perilous time, and I think it's good for Egypt. Why? Because it will give us the initiative to say in a loud voice, you have to put in mind that there is a continent like Africa and other countries also who cannot afford to be a victim of all these international struggles.
Yes. Well, the African countries, the African continent, which is what President Sisi has actually mentioned, it's the biggest victim. We pay the biggest price for climate change and carbon emissions, even though the African continent is not the main responsible party in such a crisis. And as you've mentioned, the situation with the energy, especially in Europe, I mean, even European countries can't even come to terms or come to a certain consensus regarding how the energy should be distributed around the continent. So do you feel that with this summit, Egypt can prove that it's not just a victim, but also it holds an answer for a green energy, renewable energy, which Egypt is has a big potential in terms of renewable energy that could be used for the country, for the African countries, and also for the rest of the world?
Well, of course, we have to use other means, because let's face it, the world that we're living in is the world of survival for the fittest. So we cannot just, unfortunately, cry and beg every superpower to help us. We have to tell them, no, we have the alternative. And I think that Egypt itself has the greatest solar system now that we are having in the Middle East. We are showing the international community that we are capable of producing our own electricity from the solar system. We have also the electricity now. We have sufficient industry in this domain. So we will tell the world that we are ready. We are not helpless. We are ready, but they have to work with us. They have to work with Africa. They have to work with the Middle East, because this would cost a lot. We all know that the green energy costs a lot. And also, it's very important to know that Egypt is maybe the country which has all these cards in its hands. We have the oil, we have the gas, we have the solar system, we have the agriculture, and we have also our strategic position. So and our military and our diplomacy and our leadership. So we're not a helpless country. Yes, we could be, unfortunately, a victim. This is the truth. This is the truth between the struggle between the nuclear superpowers in the world, like the United States and Russia and European countries. But we still have our importance, and we still have our position. So I think that we will make some proposals in these meetings. But again, as I say, are they ready to hear what we want to say? I don't think that with the current circumstances they will be ready, because we have seen now that Europe is very concerned about the gas supplies. So as Russia, so as the United States. The whole world is focused on not the climate change. They're not interested in this anymore. And we have to make this summit an alarm for them to tell them, well, look, these kind of energy provokes wars. Why not work together on the peaceful energy, and it could bring stability?
Yes.
Let's wait and see.
Well, hopefully a lot can come out, a lot of success can come out of the COP27 summit that will be taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh in November, and Egypt is really looking forward and working quite hard, especially with Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry doing all the preparations from now, even much earlier as well. Dr. Sharif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs from the University of Paris, thank you very much for joining us, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, now turning to our topic for tonight, looking at the past achievements over the past 8 years since President al-Sisi has taken and assumed his position in office, looking at the national mega projects, infrastructure, the agricultural sector, the energy sector, looking at the health sector as well. The new cities being built. A lot has been achieved, and still a lot more is on the horizon. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
The Egyptian economy recorded a growth rate of 7.8% during the first 9 months of the current fiscal year, ending on the 30th of June 2022, compared to 1.9% during the same period last year. The growth rate during the third quarter of the current fiscal year has reached 5.4%. Minister of Planning Hala Said expected the real growth rate to reach 6.2% by the end of the fiscal year, driven by the growth spurt achieved in the first 9 months. She pointed out that there was a noticeable improvement in all economic activities during the 9 months, as the leading sectors of growth were restaurants, the hotel sector, the Suez Canal, the manufacturing industry, and the construction and building sectors. In this context, the Minister of Planning clarified the sectors that contributed the most to the GDP during both the third and final quarter and the first 9 months of the current fiscal year, as they contributed 61% of the total output. These also included manufacturing, trade, extraction and real estate activities, as well as the agricultural sectors. In the field of communications, the development of high-speed internet services also expanded, and technological industries and outsourcing services have also grown. She pointed out that unemployment rates during the third quarter of the fiscal year fell to 7.2% compared to 7.4% during the third quarter of the last fiscal year. Minister indicated that inflation rate increased from 8% in January 2022 to 14.9% in April on an annual basis.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined here tonight in the studio by Mrs. Sahar Damaty, the banker and economic expert. Mrs. Damaty, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Mrs. Damaty, first of all, I mean, now we're looking at about 8 years since President Sisi assumed office, and when you try and evaluate those past 8 years, you always look at the achievements and what has been done, and the main focus over the past few years were national mega projects, trying to work to raise the Egyptian economy. And obviously we've been going through a lot of turbulences, be it crises, political crises taking place around the world, a pandemic taking over the whole world. So many things have been already hampering a lot of achievements, yet Egypt has achieved a lot. Before we start delving into specific sectors and their effect on the Egyptian economy, in your opinion, what has been the major significant leap or development? Which sector you saw that was quite impressive, the kind of progress being achieved?
Okay, if you allow me, I will not start with a specific sector. Rather, I would like to start by something I consider core for any development whatsoever, which is security. 2011 to up to 2013, we've been under turmoil, and we didn't have any security. We couldn't walk on the streets. People were always feeling not safe. Electricity was cut 24/7,
Yeah.
so we had a hell of a lot of problems. Aside from terrorism that was leading to the death of soldiers from the army or from the police, both of them. We used to wake up every day seeing people dead. So I believe that the core that was installed in the first year was the security. And without security, you cannot have development, you cannot have sectors, you cannot have anything. So that was number one, very important. I also believe that the foreign diplomacy that has taken place by His Excellency the President was fantastic in visiting most of the countries, speaking with all of the countries, making sure that they understand the new strategy of Egypt. And also he was able to gain support from different governments, including US and so on. So that was by itself providing some kind of what we say stability politically, which I consider very important. Thirdly, there was the economic reform that has taken place in coordination with the World Bank and the IMF in order to cure 40 years of economic problems that have been causing substantial pain and drain of resources, so that was a direction that has taken place. At the very same time, the government was embarking on a number of what we call strategic projects rather than mega projects, I would say. At the beginning, it was the infrastructure projects, which was very important, as well as electricity, energy. Energy is not a matter of only where they were successful in terms of having proper industries in place regarding electricity. Rather, they changed the strategy by itself, and you had a diversification of energy in terms of nuclear energy in Al-Dab'a, in terms of the sun and
solar energy, wind energy,
wind energy, fantastic. Okay, so the first time we had stability of electricity. The economic reform was very important because it was end of the day under the umbrella of his presidency and his approval. So that gave it a lot of power. So we had substantial reform when it comes to monetary policy and when it comes also to the fiscal policy. In addition to a very strong umbrella for to cover all the needy or what we call the low income brackets, poverty, alleviation of poverty and so on. So that by itself was a very strong reform, and we started feeling the positive impact of these reforms across the years in terms of decrease in unemployment level, in terms of increase in GDP, percentage growth of GDP. So that was really substantial development. The economic reform is not necessarily only fiscal monetary policy but rather it's a whole framework that covers the whole economy by itself in terms of you need to cover investment and the legal platform for that to be able to attract for investment. The strategy of being self-sufficient when it comes to major commodities like wheat, for instance. So reclamation of land in huge areas. We're talking about 4 million acres. That was substantial. The creation of the silos, having big major mega, starting with the Suez Canal, the second Suez Canal. And the importance of this lies in the fact that people might think that this infrastructure was not really needed so much, we needed other things. However, when you speak about infrastructure and you speak about mega projects, it means that you are actually hiring all the Egypt contractors. I was at the banking sector, and before this, we didn't have a lot of lines, credit facilities to contractors. But once they started the infrastructure, means roads and bridges and along with agricultural projects, industrial agricultural products, industry and so on. So you started hiring all the contractors in the country. When you hire contractors, you don't only hire contractors, you hire 82 different specializations. You hire the cement. I mean, you start getting the production of the products of cement, of iron, of glasses, So you made you activated the economy substantially, made sure that the level of unemployment decreased substantially, made sure that all of these industries are working and producing to cover for those mega projects. So I believe that was a substantial development, and it will be felt more in the future, to tell you the truth. Having said that, also there was a very big emphasis on industries, different sectors, whether we're talking fertilizers, whether we're talking cement, whether we're talking petrochemicals, and so on and so forth. It's because actually industry is very important. It contributes around 17.1% of total GDP in the country. And it actually also hires a lot of people. So it leads to decrease in the level of unemployment. It leads to growth in GDP, as I said. And also by industries, it's meant to be directed to exports as well as decreasing imports. So you're covering the gap in the trade balance, which is very important. So the industry was giving significant importance at the time, up to now, as a matter of fact, not at the time. I mean, we're still...
Yes, we're still in the process, definitely.
We're still in the process. And I think the next period will show a lot of developments also in different areas, specifically in the industrial areas, with the incorporation of the private sector in the cycle, in the economic cycle, but that's quite important. So there has been, I mean, I can keep on talking and talking.
Well,
talking.
you've laid out a platform for many questions right now, so let's take it one by one. I mean, you've spoken about the economic reform and you've talked about the self-sufficiency, and you've mentioned the agricultural sector, the land reclamation, the wheat, obviously 1 million Fadan, the new delta, the Mustaqbal Masr, Egypt's future project, also Toshka, a project that is being revitalized and revisited in a much developed sense of the word. Now, how far are we in terms of reaching that sort of level of self-sufficiency as a result of some of the mega projects, especially that you've also mentioned that now we have great sources of energy, be it electricity, solar, wind. Now, to reach that sort of self-sufficiency, when can we actually reach that goal, or at least be very close to it?
I'll tell you something. First of all, this was a major goal that was put within the strategy regarding some of the major commodities. However, with the Ukraine-Russian crisis, and from my point of view, the issue of globalization practically is coming to an end very soon. I think that since the president had this as a major goal for self-sufficiency in a country of 100 million and growing continuously, right now it's becoming a necessity, point blank.
Yes.
It is a necessity, and it will be a necessity for most of the countries, by the way, not to survive through the same turmoil we have been surviving since last February, in that sense. So we already have the land allocated for it. Proper irrigation techniques are in place right now. So this is core, because we had problems in this area, but this has been covered. The necessity says now.
Yes.
Now, you started already the plantation of approximately, if I am correct, my memory is helping me, around 1 million acres.
Yes.
So, and you have the silos there, probably you're going to have to build more, so that at any point in time, you're going to have self-sufficiency. In addition to that, since you're speaking about this issue, I think also there has been a lot of incentives given to the farmers in that respect.
Yes.
Private sector will be incorporated, or are already incorporated, in the cultivation of areas for major commodities. We're not talking about wheat by itself. We're talking about sugarcane. We're talking about maize. We're talking about wheat. We're talking about corn. So we're talking about sugar. Very important products that you need to preserve. This will help you in a number of ways. First of all, it will decrease your imports. Very important. Secondly, it could provide a surplus for probable exportation. Thirdly, it's going to hire a lot of people in this. Plus, whenever you have a new land and a new cultivation in place, you always tend to find the development of smaller micros along the lines. And smaller micros are core for development and for employment generation. So I think it's a fantastic project.
Yes. Mrs. Damaty, now you're a veteran in the banking business, and you've even had your experience with the World Bank in Washington, and you've witnessed all the dynamics of the banking sector here in Egypt, which which has changed and developed over the past few years, especially with the banking culture of using everything for credit, reducing transactions with cash. You've spoken of the digitalization. Now, with all of these things, and you've mentioned the small and medium enterprises, startups, entrepreneurship, all these things, the private sector, you've mentioned it as well. Now we're enabling, the government is enabling the private sector even more, getting more companies into the stock exchange. Now, how has the banking sector's dynamics changed, and what is the future of it now? Looking, I mean, should it focus more on SMEs? Should it focus more on the private sector? Should it focus more on attracting foreign investors?
Banking sector is a place where you put all your savings and you employ those savings in different products.
Yes.
Primarily credit facilities. What you have in the in the banking sector as a whole right now, you would find we have deposits in the neighborhood of around 5.8 trillion Egyptian pounds, while when it comes to credit facilities, it's standing at approximately 2 trillion Egyptian pounds. So there is a kind of liquidity in between, around 48%. This is what it is. That the composition of the portfolio of the lending is composed of, number one, corporate lending, large corporates, small corporates, SMEs, retail. Okay, this is the composition. The only thing that have really a cap on the top of this would be the SMEs, not to be less than 25% of the total portfolio of credit of the banks. And so far the banks accomplished 400 billion worth of credit facilities financing SMEs. This is where we stand right now. The rest more or less would be between corporate lending and retail, mainly.
Yes.
I think with the incorporation, and this would come to your second question, because you asked 4 questions. So this is number 1. Number 2. The second question would be whether the banking sector have appetite for more lending to private sector, which are supposed to be incorporated heavily in the current strategy of His Excellency the President and the government in the development of the economy going forward. They will lead more or less what we call the development of the economy by getting into around 80 sectors from which the government is going to pull out completely. They are thinking also of an additional 45 sectors. And in addition to that, they will be getting, they will get in with a 10 billion per annum to reach 40 billion across the next 4 years from the public sector or from the government. The government will still have some few sectors which are mainly related to security and not really income generation, more or less, but they will be there. So do we have credit? Yes. We have a lot of liquidity in the banking sector to cover for all the needs. So, by the way, that's quite welcomed. Okay, so this is the second part of your, or the third part, second and third part of your question. The last part of your question is about
foreign investors.
Foreign investors. Good. What has been done so far in terms of infrastructure, in terms of law related to investment and amendment of the law, in terms of decreasing the bureaucracy in order to enable investors to come in and finish all documents and paperwork fast. So it has started, but it's going to be further amended. In addition to that, to attract foreign investment, the government mentioned that they are going to give lots of incentives when it comes primarily to two things: taxation, which is very important,
Yes.
in addition to land. And foreigners they love to have those two,
Yes.
specifically some kind of incentives to make them come, like what's happening in most of the countries.
Yes.
And Egypt has a lot of advantage. Most important advantage, a huge level of population. It's a great
Yes.
market where you can really sell. And here the appetite for consumption is huge. So the market is very good. Secondly, you have a fantastic location for the country. The Red Sea and the White Sea. Thirdly, you have the Suez Canal. Fourthly, you have a lot of minerals in the country that can be part of the industries, of the new industries to be incorporated. So this would be, I think it's going to work. I believe it's a great initiative. Your last question was regarding digitalization. Where are we going with digitalization? Digitalization technology, it's a future.
Yes.
Okay? You cannot grow and you cannot compete worldwide unless you're very strong in those areas.
Yes, definitely.
When it comes to digitalization or improving the banking sector products in terms of ATMs, in terms of credit cards, in terms of internet banking. I mean, usually I started to say that your branch, your bank is your mobile. You sit at home, you do everything with the mobile.
Yes.
So that's very important. So I think there has been significant development done in this area, further to be done in the future in those two areas. And also, they are thinking very seriously about incorporating within the educational system of the country the issue of banking, digitalization, so that when the youth grow up, they don't fear technology.
Yes.
They don't fear the use of numbers. They don't fear. This is a fantastic development, and it has a lot of advantage. I can speak about it for half an hour.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this show, but as you've heard from Mrs. Damaty, a lot of progress has been done, and definitely it does have a big effect on the Egyptian economy, the banking sector, all sorts of businesses. A lot of people were wondering why all the work and money being spent on the infrastructure, but as Mrs. Damaty has mentioned, this only enables more investors to have more courage to get into the Egyptian market, which is a quite fertile soil with all the populations, the customers, over 100 million citizens living, potential buyers, potential consumers, potential workers. A lot has been achieved and a lot more is being aspired to. But this is all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. Before I go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Mrs. Sahar Damaty, the banker and economic expert. Mrs. Damaty, it's been a pleasure having you with us on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Damaty. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Night International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.